In today's video I show you how I painted this Hulk statue that I made as a wedding gift for a good friend. He's a massive Rolex fan and has the Submariner Hulk edition, and what's better next to a Hulk watch than the real deal. And it turns out his wife's friends also call her Hulk from time to time because she's so strong. So it turned out to be a fitting gift for both of them. But the signs weren't that good from the beginning because I had to deal with this massive frosting effect and even cracks in the paint after 2 days of work when I applied the first round of varnish. If you want to print and paint this model yourself, it was sculpted by Daniel Gustavo Herrera and is available on CG Trader. I printed the base with my FDM printer, and after I reprinted the top half of the purple base part, I glued those 3 parts together, put the resin printed Hulk feet on top so the keys would fit perfectly when the epoxy has cured, and then I removed the gaps and the print lines with Haze epoxy sculpt and wood filler. After that I used a mix of black and white acrylic crafting colors as a base, and then the painting process itself started. I started with Game Color Earth and then did some shading with charred brown on top. And since I was too lazy to do any masking, I then needed to use some Stonewall Grey to fix the overspray. For the metal beam sticking out of the dirt, I used dark flesh tone as a base color and Cayman Green for that pipe coming out of the ground. Then with Parasite Brown I added a bit of rust effect for those metal parts. With that, the colors were already blocked out and I did a first weathering round with a watered down acrylic black. Afterwards I used some black oil paint, thinned down with white spirit, and let that flow into the crevices. I do like oil colors more for weathering and washes because they give you much more control and time than acrylics. What the base was missing now were the lane markings. And if you ask yourself why I didn't do that before the weathering, I don't know, it would have been smarter. For those lane markings I took crepe tape that I firstly cut to the width I wanted those lane markings to be, and placed them onto the base. Then I masked around them and removed the actual lane marking stripes. That gave me a perfect mask for the right size and shape of those lanes that I painted with sun yellow. Unfortunately, I ripped some of the grey paint off when removing the masking tape because I hadn't varnished the base at this point, but that was fixed easily with a quick touch-up with Stonewall Grey and a black wash. Then I used a bit of Stormy Blue thinned down with water as a wash to give the concrete a slight hint of blue or coldness. And then after I put a craft matte varnish on top, the last step was a little bit of dry brushing with Stonewall Grey, and then I put the finished base to the side and started with Hulk. As a base color I used Montana Latte because I wanted to start with something close to a regular skin color, but in retrospective green as a base color would have been better. And you'll see why in a minute. I started with dark green that I used to paint all the deeper spots of the muscle striations. Then I started speckling with different kinds of greens that will later hopefully subtly shine through the skin. Afterwards I painted the veins with dark green, and with that I had everything set in place to put the final skin tone on top. For that I started with Sick Green. The trick here is to have an even layer of paint everywhere, but at the same time don't spray on too much to hide the details from the previous step. And since this doesn't always work, I afterwards had to repaint the veins, but this time I mixed glaze medium into the green so that it gets more transparent once it's dried. Then I used a brighter green to paint the high spots of the muscle bellies. And since you can hardly overdo different kinds of color shades, I used an even brighter green on top of that. But by now the shading in the recesses that I did with dark green initially were not pronounced enough anymore, so I now used pastels to paint the recesses with a dark green tone again. I do prefer pastels because it's way harder to screw up with them than with an airbrush. You can very easily create subtle and smooth shadows. And then it was time to varnish for the first time, and that's where the drama began. When I came back the next day, the matte varnish created this massive frost effect or grey haze. And at some spots the green paint even cracked and revealed the base color, which is why I previously said it would have been better to take a green rattle can color as a base. then these cracks wouldn't have been as obvious as they were now. My question to you guys is, did something similar already happen to you as well? From the research I did so far, the most likely thing that happened was that the paint was not completely dry. Even though acrylics feel dry after you hit them with a hairdryer for a minute, they still should have around 24 hours of drying time before they are really dry. If there is still water in the color and with the clear coat on top, the water can't escape and accumulates between the paint and the varnish layer. Additionally, the places where I had this grey haze were all spots where I sprayed on more varnish. To get matte varnish matte, it has matting agents in it. If the paint layer is too thick, it can be that these matting agents gather at one place. So this problem technically should not be possible to occur with gloss varnish. The second possibility is that too much varnish causes it to dry only on the top layers, but the moisture can't escape the lower layers and remains as a grey haze. I will do further investigations, and when I find out more, I will post a video about the topic. But for now, please let me know if you also had this problem in the past. So, to fix this issue, first of all I had to sand the cracks, because they would have been visible if you just put a paint over it. That meant I had to repeat the whole shading process, and then 2 more days later the skin color was done and it was time for the final details. For the nails I used dark sand as a base color, and for the hair, tire black. After all the double shading, the initial vein painting was not really visible anymore, so I redid that as well, again with glaze medium mixed into the paint to make sure it's really subtle when dried. For a few more highlights and color variations, I used Escorpena green in some of the wrinkles and cracks in the skin. Then I revisited the face with Goblin green, and after that I mixed a bit of burnt umber with Sick green for the lips. And by varying the mix a bit, I was able to paint some subtle color differences there. And since Hulk's got a serious undercut, I mixed black and blue pastel for the sides of his head. For the teeth, my go-to color is bone white, and for the eyeballs, ivory. Then I grabbed my eye decals. If you didn't get them for yourself yet, do that right now. Aligned them correctly, and then I used the tire black that I used on the hair for the eyebrows. Then I went back to the face because I felt like it was too uniform and went into all the low spots with dark green oil paint. By the way, I also did cover up those tiny cracks in the paint with the greens I used for the skin tone. To give the finger and toenails more depth, I went in with burnt umber oil color. For the pants, I started with hexed lichen and then dry brushed Warlord purple on top. And since we're already at the dry brushing, I also did that for the hair with a tiny notch of Escorpena green. Afterwards I went back to the pants and airbrushed some highlights on top. A bit more of oil color on the nails, and then it was time for varnishing. For the pants I used a matte varnish and hand painted along the edges of the pants, and then I masked off all the skin parts and airbrushed the rest of it. The nails, mouth and eyes received some gloss varnish, and the very last step was to take a drop of UV resin to give the irises more depth. And then I called it good, and Hulk was ready to be packed for his new home.
They call me a god. 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 Let's go. I'm about to go off like a weapon. Fuel to the top, got a filled up engine. In my thoughts, obsession. I will not stop, no, I'm never second guessing. I got a God complex. Haters love to hate, but I never feel pressed. Got a lot on my plate, but I never get stressed. I'll take all the pressure like I'm acing this test. Tear it up like I'm Jason. I see the world like it's ready for the taking. I see this place like a game I'm playing. Straight to the bank to collect my payments. No negotiations, it's my way, I was born impatient. And like a damn Freemason, I'll run this nation. They call me a